Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next The Dawn of Yangchen chapter analysis video. This one's going to be for chapter 29, which is called Following Through. So an important chapter here, we finally get the interaction between Kavik and Kalyan, and it very much does not go the way Kavik expects it to go. We effectively find out that Kalyan is much more sort of fully involved. He effectively is a Shang merchant now. That seems to be where his focus is, and he is very much not the person Kavik expected to sort of find. He's been very much sort of changed by these years of experience being working with the Shang merchants and the Zongdus and so on. And so the big part of the chapter is, of course, that Kalyan effectively is like, I'm going to need you to lie to the Avatar to get her off the trail so that I can keep myself safe, other people around me safe, and get the unanimity to Han Shi. And, you know, we get, of course, Kavik reluctantly feeling like he has to do this. We'll get into the characterization surrounding that. And then the chapter does end with Kavik actually, lying to Yangchen and the others about where unanimity is and getting her off the scent. And literally the ending point is that now Kavik is more sort of, I suppose, aligned with his brother, and he is actually on the ship with the unanimity. So it's a big tease of like, he's basically right there next to this thing. Still hasn't been told yet, but he probably will shortly. So big chapter here. Let's get into it. So, we of course get this sort of cliffhanger from not the last chapter, but the chapter before, which was the Kalyan reveal. So immediately Kavik tackles Kalyan to the ground and starts kind of throwing punches. Like, he's furious at Kalyan for everything that's happened here. We've obviously seen the build-up of emotions around this, going from thinking I have to rescue him to kind of finding that, oh, well, he just left and hasn't returned, and now finding out that he's actually in a fairly high up position in the Shang merchants and still hasn't contacted them. And so you can see where the anger is coming from. It gets quite intense here. Kalyan initially sort of lets Kavik get the advantage, but quickly is like, okay, you're potentially going to hurt me now. And he just completely, turns the tables. He starts like choking Kavik, brings him back to his feet, and is kind of like, calm down. And then he asks, how are mother and father? And Kavik's furious at this. You don't get to ask that, you could have visited us, written to us, let us know you were alive. And he just points out, I could have done none of those things. Look at where I am. I'm in Jondari. And even Kavik knows that, Chaisi, she doesn't let, hawks come in and out like without basically being intercepted. If he sent anything to the family, he would have been found out, because again, he's undercover for Han Shi, so he's trying to protect that, but he also doesn't want people to know about his family. So there's a bunch of reasons for kind of why he doesn't do that. But up to now, you're kind of like, okay, this seems somewhat reasonable. Kavik's frustration is fine. Kalyan maybe not being fully understanding of just how much he has maybe hurt Kavik in all of this, but doesn't seem too bad so far. Then we get a little bit of a backstory. So effectively covering the idea of, we had his backstory up to the point at which he left the family. He had done some errand running, got them the new house, effectively got Water Tribe contracts delivered to someone else, so he sort of betrayed the community, and then left and never came back. Here's where we get it. Kalyan explained that early on in his errand-running career, he associated with like-minded, ambitious young people in the international quarter. It was a good way to meet potential buyers. He became friends with a low-level administrator named Han Shi, who had an appetite for risk as big as his. They started working together, securing small advantages and trading them into bigger ones. They were a successful team, and eventually Han Shi rose up through the ranks, and he got Kalyan sent overseas. So it's described here, I suppose, that Han Shi is what got Kavik his pass out of Bin and it was to sort of have him be this deep plant inside Chaise's organization, which is, I suppose, the one truly clever thing that Hunsha has done in all of this, having Kalyan, undercover there to work to his advantage. And Hunsha's like, Kalyan is like, I think it worked better than expected. And Kavik is shocked by this because he's like, wait, you're fine with all of this? Like, he seems to be like proud of all this work he's done, given that he's working for the Shangs. And this is the sort of, in a way, shock in all of this, is that, Kalyan is loyal to the Shangs. He like agrees with this and is in. He kind of wants this as well. And it's this sense of like, okay, he's sort of been, in a way, corrupted by all of this. This is how he felt he could get his way out of all of this. But in doing so, at least to Kavik, it feels like he has become this sort of different person. Now, to be fair, it maybe highlights that Kavik didn't know his brother as well as he thought he did. Because, his brother is always this super talented, but now he's found out that sort of like he always had a sense of ambition. And he was never going to be able to fulfill that, just, being part of the Water Tribe community. And so this is him, in a way, doing what he can to rise up through the ranks. And so there's a really complex, I think, discussion to be had about Kalyan here in all of this. But he says, I rose faster and higher in the ranks, in Chaise's ranks, than I could have dreamed. I take care of the project she doesn't want her name linked to, which means I have a say in matters. So the problem at the warehouse, not a problem anymore, because people listen to what I have to say. If I say that it's a guy heroically saving half the goods instead of destroying half, they'll agree because I said that's the interpretation that we're meant to have. So he says, once I got in deep, I couldn't contact the family safely, and not even with a messenger hawk. And so Kavik's kind of like, oh yeah. So you were doing this for the family, of course, and protecting us, of course that's what you were going to say. Because Kavik is seeing this as just, you left us behind and made a good life for yourself. That's, I suppose, he's wealthy now in the position that he is in. Kavik is still annoyed about this. But Kalyan says, I'm protecting you still. And there's some big reveals here. I got you through the association door because otherwise you would have blundered straight into Chaise's arms. Just because I slipped past her guard doesn't mean you're capable of it. Why would you risk your life for the Avatar, of all people? There's no gain there. Kavik tries to argue that you don't know who I'm working for, but he points out that I do. I know all about the resources required to get people places, and effectively points out that, like, you turning up in the city basically the same day as the Avatar, you used air nomad travel kind of allowances to get here. That's the big thing. So it's clear you're after something big. And then he's like, logbook, please. And he just kind of points out that, like, you were basically on the right track. You were so close to figuring out the unanimity in all of this. So he does note, though, that, it doesn't really matter that I've taken the logbook from you because our family has amazing minds. We remember things. I'm not quite sure if they're presenting the idea that potentially Kavik and his family have photographic memories, or just that they have good memories. Because Kalyan does seem to highlight the idea of, like, I assume you've memorized all of this, and it's like a whole logbook full of things. So interesting. But Kavik takes from this of, like, in a way, so, like, you're the one who had Kyo killed. Because if you do things for Chaise, you're the one who made all of those decisions to a degree. And he doesn't really answer, but I think the idea is meant to be there that, like, in a way, that's why Kyo actually got taken out, is that Kalyan had some involvement in that, because Kyo would have recognized Kalyan because they both were in Bin Urad at a certain point. So interesting stuff there in all of this. But this is where we get the idea. Kalyan says, you've put me in a really bad spot. If the Avatar gets too desperate for answers, too scared on your behalf, she might smash apart the whole trade route regardless of consequences. And so he begins to figure out, how does he deal with Yangchen, given that he has her right-hand man right there in front of him. And he's kind of like, I need to give her a victory, a distraction, while I pry unanimity out of Chai-Si's grip and into Honsha's. Once it reaches Bin-Er, it'll be all over. At this point, Kavik does ask, are you going to tell me what unanimity is? But he just gets the answer. Nothing bad, just leverage. Honsha wants the same thing as your boss, really, stability and peace. And Kavik points out, you're afraid to tell me. You're about to give Honsha an asset that will let him get away with whatever he wants, and you want me to close my eyes and pretend everything will be okay. And Kalyan says, because it will. Nothing bad is going to happen if the Avatar doesn't get her way. The sun will rise. Business will go on as usual. The world will be tomorrow much as it was yesterday. So she just needs to receive the right information from the right source, and then all will be well. So here it comes out. So you want me to betray the Avatar. And I like the response from Kalyan here. It's like, you make it sound like you'll be plunging a dagger into the beating heart of the four nations. I'll give you some good information, you pass it on, that's all it will be. It'll be good information, it'll be valid information, it'll just be a bit out of date. And so the question is, why? Why would I do this for you? And Kalyan says, because you don't owe her anything. How is that so hard to understand? And he's getting annoyed at this point with him. And he does point out, he gets a bit real here. Honsha has me in a bind. I have to come through for him right here or now, or he'll reveal me to Chai-Si. If she finds out I was a plant the whole time, I wouldn't be dead. I'd be wishing I was. So, he seems like he's in a somewhat comfortable position, but also he's struggling with it as well. That Honsha has information of just, he's Honsha's plant, so Honsha can get an advantage. So he has to deliver for Honsha to make this work. But he does also have to be still fearful of Chai-Si and stuff like that. But now Yangchen is in the middle of all of this, potentially going to get in the way. So he has to make sure, this is key for Kalyan here, the unanimity has to switch from under Chai-Si's control to being under Honsha's control. That's what Kalyan has to do at this point. Everything will be fine after that. But the problem is that Yangchen wants the unanimity. So that's the big thing here. He does point out that he knows about Akudan and Tayugum and says, what are they to you? Substitutes for our parents while you're in Jandari? And Kavik says, maybe they're substitutes for you. So we really see here that Kavik is not impressed with, in a way, meeting his brother again. That he would make a statement like that maybe they're more brothers to me than you are currently. That's how unimpressed he is at the moment. Then kind of comes the guilt trip from Kalyan. I'm asking you to protect me, Kavik. Have you forgotten I'm your family? Those people, Honsha, Chai-Si, Yangchen, doesn't matter in the end. Let them play their games against each other. I can admit that we're both a little too deep in this at this point, but only one of us is going to get killed if he fails. If there's a person in this world you owe, it's me, little brother, not the Avatar. And Kavik is, in a way, stunned by this, because this is his brother who was so nice to him before, saved his life, and didn't seem to think anything of it, is now sort of calling in the debt here of like, I saved your life, now you have to do this for me in this situation. And Kavik is sort of stunned by this, because, Water Tribe family is meant to be close. This shouldn't be a thing like this of like, how they come to this. You didn't try to square accounts with your own flesh and blood. The notion was madness. And he says, play this right and you can have it both ways. And he tells her what the information that he wants him to give her is just that, tell the Avatar that she needs to go to Port Tugok. The assets were tested there. She'll find plenty of clues to linger over. You'll be her hero. So there's an interesting thing, a little tease about the unanimity. The weapon was tested in Port Tugok. So it is the truth that unanimity is somewhere or has been there. It's just that it's already happened. They're giving out-of-date information that this thing is still down there. So it's valid information, like you won't be in too bad of a situation because you gave her information that was actually correct. This is where Kavik begins to figure out that, like, oh, the reason you're telling me this is because after this is done, you'll effectively just have someone who's deep in the Avatars group. That's what you want. You basically want me to be a plant in the Avatar's retinue. And finally, in a way, Kalyan sort of comes clean and is just like, well, yeah, as long as we're being honest with each other. And I find the next little section interesting because this is Kavik's decision right here. It happens very quickly. They don't go into it in particular depth. It just says, that was it. Kavik found his limit. He broke. The act of breaking hurt physically. A deep, shuddering sob ripped through his chest. He tried to laugh, but only succeeded in making a dry, hollow noise, like a ladle scraping the sides of an empty barrel. It was a sound of capitulation, weakness. Just tell me what story to give her, Kavik said. And so, what I like about this is that it does leave it open to interpretation to a degree. Because Kavik is effectively... There's a level of blackmail involved here. There is a level of guilt tripping involved here. But also, I think, manipulation from Kalyan. Pointing out little things that, like, you only got into the organization because of me. Do you really think you got in the door just on your own? And that you're as good as me? No, you're not. You've never been good enough. I've always been protecting you throughout all of this. And this is where we go back to the idea of Kavik from before. Who always in the past considers himself to be the burden. He blames himself for everything that happened and that it's all because he wasn't actually good enough. That is in a way how he sort of defines his relationship with his brother, is that his brother was always the stronger one, the better one, and that Kavik himself was useless. And it's so interesting to compare that character who we've seen a few times, that version of Kavik, versus the Kavik that we have seen come more into the forefront through interacting with Yangchen and I suppose truly becoming her companion. We have seen Kavik become like a hero in a way, like show some real skill at bending, at this sort of, spycraft business to a certain degree. He is skilled. There's a reason Yangchen picked him. And we see that part of it is his skill, not just that he was a kind of unknown. So it's a lot of this is about, the past coming up again. Kavik not being able to kind of, in a way, be the stronger character that he now is around his brother because he feels he'll never be as good as his brother. I do also think, bringing up the past of like, I saved your life from before. Now you have to effectively save mine by betraying the Avatar. It's meant to be this moment where if this was the Kavik from like 2 chapters ago, the one fighting in the warehouse, who basically won the day, if that same character was here at the end, I think he would have made the opposite decision. But instead we get the idea that Kalyan kind of managed to bring out the older, the weaker Kavik, who pretty much goes back to that day when in the blizzard when Kavik was 8 years old. So, this is when he returned to Akudan's inn, and he tells everyone there, including Yangchen, Taigum is there, Akudan is there. We were wrong about the warehouse. Unanimity is not there. And he basically says that there is a shipment scheduled to arrive in Jonduri from Port Tugak with 3 slots in the storage queues reserved so they can be transferred quickly from Jonduri to Bin Ur. And he basically leaves this open as like, okay, Yangchen, figure it out. And she jumps in and is like, I gotta go to Port Tugak and I can intercept the unanimity there. I just have to act very, very quickly. And he realizes in an instant that she 100% trusts me. I'm lying, I'm betraying her here in doing this. And it breaks him so much more to see that there's no doubt anymore with Yangchen. She trusts every word coming out of Kavik's mouth here completely. Even Taigum and Akudan are like, they've come to kind of respect Kavik a little bit more. He mentions, it's on the Sunbeam, 3 masted junk, I don't know if it's departed yet. And it's really notable here because, you know, she's kind of like, oh, I can do this. I can get down there and get it done. He even points out that, like, please don't go alone. But she's like, no, I have to. You three have to be here. You know, she says, Akuda and Taigum, you make sure nothing happens to the workers who have just been involved in that incident. Kavik, you're going to be the sort of last ditch thing. Like, if this shipment if I miss the shipment and it arrives here, I need you to be involved in this and try and make something happen. And she goes over to him, she hugs him, and she even says right close to him, I knew I was right about you, she whispered in his ear, fondness radiating from her embrace. And she leaves. She heads off for Port Tugak at this point. So, you know, it's worked. He has got himself completely trusted by Yangchen, and he, in a way, just kind of hates himself in this moment for kind of having to do this. You know, this show of weakness because of meeting his brother again. It's very, very interesting. So after this, as mentioned, you know, at Kalyan's orders, he spent 2 days at the association's safe house instead of the inn. So he effectively sort of lies to the others and is saying, like, okay, I'll just go along with what they want me to do so I don't, like, act up and make it look like something is going on, when in fact this allows him to just get more information directly from his brother, and so on. So this is where we get, you know, there's a little bit more interaction here of Kavik and Jujinta. They become a little bit closer. They already are somewhat close at this point. It's mentioned here. Kavik came to fresher understanding of his partner's intense spiritual concerns, even if Jujinta refused to explain where he came from, the exact terms of his brother's death, or how he was responsible. There are crimes one cannot live down. Certain acts cannot be forgiven. And Kavik says, not even by the right person. Jujinta just says, the person who could have granted me forgiveness is gone. I ask the spirits every day but receive no answer. I don't know who else I can turn to for guidance. And Kavik just notes that, like, not me, that's for sure. And so he had his own betrayal to finish carrying out. The next day, at Kalyan's orders, he left Jujinta behind, left both safe houses behind, and got on a ship bound for Bin-Ur alongside the very boxes containing unanimity. And that's how the chapter comes to an end. So right there at the end, the setup there of, like, you know, not even by the right person, there's no one who can give me guidance, is a bit of a setup for later. It's notable that Kavik has heard Jujinta say that, and that he's taking an interest in Jujinta. That will come back later on. Obviously, the significance of Kavik being next to the unanimity means we're getting to the point in the book where we are just about ready to reveal what exactly it is, and that will be basically through Kavik figuring it out at the same time as Yangchen figures out the actual clues about unanimity in Port Tugak, because it's true. What Kalyan said, that the weapon was tested in Port Tugak, is correct. So Yangchen is actually investigating a valid part of what's going on here. It's just going to keep her out of the way while the actual transfer between Jondari and Bin-Ur happens. Meanwhile, she's all the way down here in the south. But yeah, fascinating chapter in all of this. Like, a big one for Kavik. Mere chapters after he has fully gained Yangchen's trust, become a true Avatar companion, he's been, in a way, forced. His weakness has caused him to make this decision to betray her. And it's one of those situations of, like, do you hate the character of Kavik now because he did this? You know, maybe a little bit more development could have been done. They could have hit the actual point of betrayal a little bit harder to, I think, get across more heavily what's going on here. But I think what I was talking about when I went through the scene is, I think, what you're meant to have here. Of, go back to that chapter earlier on in the book where it's Kavik just after he's been forced to dispose of Kyo's dead body. He faints and has that little flashback scene of the incident that lost Kalyan 2 of his fingers. And the contrast between that character, who seems like joking about it almost, and he's just happy that both of them made it out alive. The sacrifice for those 2 fingers is worth it if they both made it out. Versus the character here, who is calling in that debt to, like, you get me out of this one type thing. And it really does, I think, come down to the fact that, you know, Kalyan really has become embraced being a Shang merchant. He has, you know, he's not just used, I suppose, being an errand runner to get out of the city, like, get the benefit he wanted. He's full on embraced that way of life, in a way, the more underworld, you know, spy way of life. Kavik, to some degree, has as well, but he still has that, you know, sense of honor, you know, that in a way. He still has that sense of, like, he is still worthy enough to be an Avatar companion. Whereas it feels like Kalyan has fallen a bit in embracing being a Shang so much. And I do think that the main interpretation that you're meant to have here is just that meeting Kalyan again, being so broken, I suppose, by seeing his brother this way, has just brought all those memories back of, effectively, Kavik blames himself for the sequence of events that has led to Kalyan sort of being like this. And it all comes back to how weak he is, and you have those few moments of Kalyan pointing out that Kavik is still weak, that he didn't prove himself enough to be chosen by the association, that it was actually manipulation from the top by Kalyan letting Kavik in, just so that sort of he would have an asset that is sort of hidden from Chaisi and stuff like that. It's fascinating to see, because for the most part, that is this dynamic for this book. I don't believe we have scenes involving Kavik and Kalyan after this, and it's more of just, you know, the impact of this betrayal of Kavik to Yangchen, and I think it's more to set up of what's going to be happening with Kalyan in the next book, given that fundamentally this chapter is what their relationship is now. That it doesn't really seem like Kalyan is overly thinking too much of Kavik, you know, as family. He's just trying to use him in a way as an asset. You know, he does say in the middle of all of this of, like, you know, he gets kind of serious for a moment of, like, his brother looked genuinely hurt. I was going to come back. Once I was ready and I had the means, I was going to come back. You have to believe that. So it's not that Kalyan has just become a full-on villain. I think there's still some sense of hope. But I think you can tell that he maybe put the family way too much on the back burner. And that there might be an element of bringing that out to more emotionally manipulate Kavik here. But it makes Kalyan a very, very interesting character, like I said, because obviously we have to cover the events and how they happen, how they play out, and where that places Kalyan going into book 2. But it should be noted that he's a somewhat high up member of the Shangs, who is very, very capable, and of course has the very deep connection to Kavik. So there's some interesting stuff here, but they're my thoughts on this chapter. In the comments, let me know what your thoughts are. Other than that, that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.